Okay, so this is just a bit of a look at Parasite and talking about the different sort of inputs and outputs and controls that you've got. So you've got one audio input, or one primary audio input. We'll talk about the other ways you can stick audio into it in a moment. And then you've got two primary audio outputs. So the input goes through a parametric EQ, comes out, output 1, and then goes through another EQ, and then comes out out 2. So the cascaded EQ phases, stages. It does work as an EQ module. Somewhat, but it's not sort of the thing that it enjoys doing the most. So there's probably different other EQs that you can get if you that's what you're looking for. So just to sort of have a bit of a listen to what it sort of sounds like. Sounds like nothing because I haven't plugged that in. Flats in sort of the analog oscillator, virtual analog oscillator, detuned slightly. So the outputs are then, after it's fed through the EQ phases, stages, are then fed back into the input, combined with whatever's going on to the input. You can choose whether it's the first or second stage that's being fed back to the input as well. What's going on in it is very sensitive to everything else that's kind of going on at the same time. So it's a lot of fun to sort of explore the different settings. Sometimes you'll feel like, well, what's it even doing? It's not doing nothing. But then, you change one thing and then you just go off on a tangent where we're able to explore, say drone for instance, by moving all of these knobs for way too long and way too much fun. The feedback we'll hear a bit more of in a little bit as well. So with the two outputs, they're sounding quite similar at the moment, but we can hear more of those later. 2 tends to sound a little, to me, a little bit beefier than 1. My favourite sort of setting, if you're using just one of the outputs, is to use out 2 and use 1 as the feedback source. You tend to get a bit more sort of bright and sort of sizzly sounds doing it that way to me. So it's the out, the in, and the feedback. Not a very good demonstration of what the feedback actually can sound like yet, but if we take out the input and just listen to the sort of feedback alone, you can get it to self-oscillate. You can get some interesting tones out of there, and if you modulate the CVs, so the frequencies for instance, you can get some interesting stuff going on. If you send a sequence in there, you can use it as like an oscillator or bass or what have you. Bit of fun there. But then one of the sort of more, let me just shush. Then you've got the infest switches as well. So the infest kind of adds some anti-limiting to it, I guess we'll call it. So they will take, they half feedback the outputs to the input is, how Flight describes it, but yeah, we'll just listen for a second. stuff, invest on. Changing to feedback 2. So yeah, just sounds pretty regular again. But then suddenly you move to this extremely interesting place. This is now Infest 1 on, Infest 2 off. And then if you totally want to destroy everything, turn on both of the infests. So lots of fun. You can also use the so you've got CV controls here for the Q, the boost, and the frequency. So Q, boost, frequency. Sorry, I didn't talk about the controls really at all. So for each of the EQ stages, you've got so this is about equal for it. So about the center of the frequency band that each of those is controlling. The boost decides whether that particular band is boosted or cut, and then the Q decides by how much that will happen. Is the way I think of it. But if you're thinking about it as just a standard EQ instead of just, I mean, it's most interesting to sort of not think about it in those ways and just sort of, because all of these things will interact with it, because of, especially with the feedback, these things all interact with each other a lot, so the results may vary from what you would really initially anticipate if you're just looking at it, thinking about it in those ordinary sort of terms. But so the CV ins that we've got, you can also use those that's fun, as audio inputs. And you can hear that when you're using these, it will essentially sound quite a lot more filtery. But with their sort of feedback and everything like that, you'll hear that each of these different bands are going to still have an impact of that as well. You can also use multiple of those at the same time. To some really fun effects. You can also use the input at the same time as using those. The input is going to be a bit louder, quite a bit louder than those individual sort of, here I'm using the Q CVs as an audio in. You can also use the boost as like an audio input as well, but that's going to be again lower in volume than the Q CV-ins for audio too. But yeah, some really nice effects there too. So you can use those as inputs, you can also use the cues as outputs as well. So if we turn that back up, you can hear that those each sound like again filters. So if you do want to use this anti-filter as a filter, there's a way to do that. You can also ping these as well using the cues. So if you send a trigger pulse into these, especially or a short envelope, you'll get some interesting sort of congo-y, drummy sounds. No sounds out of the cue or the boost, and you can't really use the frequency inputs as an audio input. But if you do get it sort of self-oscillating, you can a little bit. Very sort of dampened, but you know, still fun. So there's a bit of an introduction to what Parasite can do. Can just give a little bit of a sample of what it sounds like on. Let's go with the snare on Platts. Just so that's a lot of fun. Coming out of there.